It's the future. It's the future. There ain't no future unless we build it now. It's the future. It's the future. It's the future. There ain't no future unless we build it now. United States, Africa, we salute ya. A new state of mind, I introduce ya. Close your eyes and visualize the rise of a new paradigm. Solar powered skyscrapers.
Welcome to the Africa Must Unite podcast, a podcast dedicated to inspiring African people worldwide to rise up, organize, and struggle for Pan-Africanism, a unified, liberated, socialist Africa, the only permanent solution to the exploitation and oppression of African people, no matter where they happen to be born or happen to live in the world. Now please, welcome the hosts of Africa Must Unite.
Africa's future is now, so get ready.
Pan-African and revolutionary greetings. I'm Mama D.
Greetings, revolutionary greetings, and I am Sister Tasha.
Welcome to podcast number 67.
Woo, 67, and we are the Pan-African Revolutionary Socialist Party, or sometimes they call us PRSP.
That's right. Use our initials, PRSP. You know, Tasha, our focus all this year has been on our 2023 calendar, Global African Youth, Caught in the Snares of Capitalism. And today we focus on the education of African youth. And, you know, we just saw a need, as you remember, as an organization to really come back and look at the disastrous consequences of living in a capitalist world for our youth. So we're going to deal with that focus on education of our African youth. We're going to try to build the relationship or explain the relationship between capitalism and the education of our youth. And then we're going to bring on our special guests for today, Kim and Pai Juth, who will discuss examples of the kinds of education our youth, the poor education our youth are receiving at home, in Africa, and abroad. So just to give a sense of where we're going today. But as always, we start off with important dates in the history of African people and other progressive people. And we never want to forget our sisters. So let's
see what's happening in July, Mama D.
I know that's right. So July's calendar dates, because this is our July theme, the youth and education. So July 1st, very important date for us who are Nkrumahists. Kwame Nkrumah became the first president of Ghana in 1960. On the 2nd of July, Denmark Vesey, African revolutionary, is hung on this date for planning a revolt of enslaved Africans in Charleston, South Carolina in 1822. And he was really organized, Tasha. He had an organization with lieutenants and everything in it. And it's just some trader, some African trader who revealed the whole plan. On this date also...
All right, but he was ready and organized, though. And that's what we always talk about.
Really organized. On this same date, July 2nd, Patrice Lumumba, Pan-African revolutionary, was born in 1925. On the 3rd of July, Ahmed Fletcher Mbalia, African revolutionary and member of the Pan-African Revolutionary Socialist Party, died in 2017. I get a little emotional. That's my partner.
I do too. I get the chills. Yeah, that's your partner.
I know that.
And that was all. That was all our Baba. Yes.
On the 4th of July, the Nation of Islam was founded by Master F. Muhammad in 1930. Also on this same date, the 4th, Zionist Israel, or we say sometimes or most times occupied Palestine Zionists, invades Uganda airport to counter Palestinian freedom fighters in 1976. On the 4th, also, we know, Tasha, the U.S. celebrates the theft of Native Americans' land. On the 5th of July, PAIGC, African Party for the Independence of Guinea and Cape Verde, led Cape Verde Islands to independence in 1975. On the 10th of July, Mary McLeod Bethune, educator and founder of Bethune-Cookman College, was born in 1875. And Tasha, you remember that powerful quote from her? I had it right here.
Is that the one about, is it about education?
Education and our youth. You know, it's about our youth. And since we're focusing on our youth, I couldn't help but go back and read this, what she said. And this is what she said. We have a powerful potential in our youth, and we must have the courage to change old ideas and practices so that we may direct their power toward good ends. And her whole life, end quote, her whole life was about working for the youth, you know, and we can definitely learn from somebody like her, can't we?
And I just love the fact that she makes a big deal out of immediate solutions and short-term solutions, how even youth right now, they can do something at their age that they're at right now, whatever age they are. Please. They have a part.
They just have to have the political education. We just got to direct them, just like she said, to good ends. It's they're getting capitalist education and not our education, African political revolutionary education that'll help them see who their enemy is and really struggle. So, I mean, that's really our role. That's why we did this calendar, isn't it, Tasha?
Yep, that's why.
On the 16th, let's see another sister, Assata Shakur, African revolutionary, born in 1947. On this same date, the 16th of July, Ida B. Wells was born. Look at these powerful people, these powerful sisters, in 1862. Yes. On the 17th, Great Britain invaded New Zealand to stop Maori uprising in 1863. Look, just like me and you, Tasha. And then on the 25th, Emmett Till, 14-year-old African, brutally tortured and murdered in Mississippi, was born in 1941. And you know, he would be 82 years old today. Isn't that right?
Oh, wow.
Yeah, on this date. And they're trying to erect now monuments in his name. On this same date of the 25th, Amy Jacques Garvey died in 1973. And, you know, our Garvey Fest celebration is coming up August 19th. This will be our 34th year of celebrating Garvey Fest. Not just the Garveys, who all are powerful, Amy Ashwood, Amy Jacques, and Marcus Garvey, but the organization, Universal Negro Improvement Association, African Communities League. So, you know, we celebrate them because they talk about reclaiming our homeland. Even if we don't live to see the day, we have to work toward the reclamation of our land-based Africa. Powerful.
Super powerful, yes.
And the last date I want to mention, on the 26th, Cuban forces, led by Castro, attacked Moncada Barracks in 1953. So, you know, Castro and other people, Cuba, really came to our aid in terms of all of our independence movements to free ourselves from colonialism and sending doctors to Africa to help us and stuff. So we can never forget the role that some people, and not all Africans either, but progressive people around the world did to help us and still helping us to move forward.
Yes, I agree. Totally agree. All right. So just looking at what we talked about on the calendar for July for this particular month, um, about youth and education, Malcolm X said something that was very interesting. He said, only a fool would let an enemy teach his children.
No, that's right.
I know that's right. Um, so African school age children are catching hell all over the world, Mama D. The education system around the world is an offshoot of the capitalist economic structure. In order for capitalism to survive, it is important that it maintains a permanent class of workers. So, where a person lives, who their parents are, and their parents' level of educational attainment are greater predictors of life outcomes than any standardized test score. In other words, structural racism, the birth child of capitalism, increases the likelihood that one will remain in poverty.
Mm.
We can find examples of this reality throughout Africa and the diaspora. In the small country of Haiti, where social and political unrest has been normalized and the people are struggling against corruption, foreign interference, and a crumbling infrastructure, schools have come to a screeching halt. School openings has been further hindered by a resurgence of cholera, which is leaving 2.4 million children out of the classroom. So that's a really, really bad disease. Ooh, that's a lot of children too. The same reality exists right at home in Africa. It is imperative that African people arrive at a consensus around the purpose of education. Furthermore, we must draw the distinction between schooling versus educating. Schooling in the U.S. is a 13-year process whereby students are taught to accept the status quo and to accept their proper station in life. Educating, on the other hand, is a process whereby students are taught that they can fundamentally change their lives and the lives of others. Many people will argue that the U.S. education system is broken. However, we also understand that it's not broken, and in fact, it is producing the intended outcomes it is designed to produce.
That's what the capitalists want you to want to produce people who are going to be just like them for themselves, selfish and money hungry.
Mm-hmm. And people that you're able to control. And then we have Paulo Freire. He reminds us in his seminal work in Pedagogy of the Oppressed that there's no such thing as neutral education. Education either functions as an instrument to bring about conformity or either freedom. We must demand an educational experience for our students that places teachers in front of them that look like them and are able to understand their cultural realities. We must also demand an educational experience that centers the African and the African experience worldwide. Education under organizations such as ours, the Pan African Revolutionary Socialist Party, is an interdisciplinary endeavor that engages a framework for analyzing the connection between history and the material reality of African people around the world. Political education seeks to understand the tools, strategies, and tactics necessary to bring about the permanent solution to the African struggle, Pan Africanism, the total liberation and unification of Africa under socialism.
No, that's
So,
right.
Mama D, woo. So in our calendar, we touched a lot about the educational system, the different snares such as poverty, the structural racism. But can you talk a little bit more, Mama D, about like the relationship between capitalism and African youth and education?
Oh yeah. And Tasha, whenever we do talk about how capitalism impacts us, we really got to go back to looking at our philosophies. So, our Nkrumah's philosophy, philosophical conscientism, clearly explains this relationship between capitalism and the poor education our African youth around the world are receiving.
Mm-hmm.
Philosophical conscientism, as all philosophies are, is a world outlook that helps us to interpret the things that happen to us in life. All philosophies emerge from a people's history and culture, but not all philosophies are grounded in the actual way in which things occur in nature, including human nature. Those that are, like ours, philosophical conscientism, incorporate a tool that enables us to analyze what happens in nature and what happens in society. This tool is called dialectical and historical materialism. It is a tool that helps us to understand that matter is primary. What we can touch, feel, taste, all of those things, see, matter. That's matter. And gives rise to human consciousness. Historical materialism specifically helps us to understand how societies operate, how they exist, how they develop, and how prevalent ideas emerge in that society. It helps us to understand the relationship between capitalism and the educational lack of education that our African youth are receiving. According to historical materialism, there are 7 really important points that can help us better understand this relationship. And we're just going to go through these 7 points. 1,
Okay.
since people must eat, drink, and have a roof over their heads, they must produce these things. They must produce what they need to eat and drink. They must construct their houses. In other words, they must work in order to survive, because nature does not provide these things ready-made. So we're saying that the whole business of producing something that you need to survive is primary. That's the main thing, because that's what's going to keep you alive.
Mm-hmm.
So people discovered long ago that they can ensure their survival better by coming together in a group. Somebody watches your back while you're cutting down a tree to build a home. You do the same. A collective, in other words, a society is needed to help you produce the things that you need to survive. Number 3, I'm going in order. Those things that we can see, touch, hear, taste, and smell are matter. In fact, sometimes, Tasha, we see our children in cars with their parents or other people, and the music saying all kinds of negative kinds of words about sisters or about cursing or about whatever it is blasting. But sound is matter too. Sound shapes the way we think. We're going to get to that. Those things that we can see with our eyes, touch with our hands, like this table or your phone. We can hear, like the music. We can taste, like the food that we eat, like salt. And we can smell, matter. Those things that we must produce in order to survive. These things. Everything that you can touch, see, hear, taste, smell. These are things that we have to produce in order to survive. So what we're saying is that matter is primary. The act of producing goods in a society, we call it the economic system, is essential to our survival and progress. Thus, the economic system is what is most important. It's life-saving, and it's a life-directing thing in all human societies. Number 4, the act of producing is important, but even more important in regard to the social and political reality, in regard to the prevalent ideas that exist in societies, is the way that we are arranged to produce. The arrangement shapes the way we think, gives rise to prevalent ideas in a society. So number 5, if the arrangement of people who produce is fair, those who produce own, and those who own produce, then the ideas that are prevalent in the society are fair. Why? Because you're working side by side. You're seeing the humanity of each other. Because each is an owner as well as a worker. Because each will ensure that they and others like them who are working side by side with them get treated fairly. However, if the arrangement of people who produce is unfair, those who produce don't own, and those who own don't get out and do no work. I'm doing double negatives now, Tasha. Then the ideas that are prevalent in that society are unfair. Why? Because you can't be on top. You can't be a few on top of the majority of the people. You can't be a tiny ruling class and not begin to think of yourself as better than, more superior to, than those not on the top. You own the tools, the technology, the media, the medicine that the rest of us depend on. And you determine how and when these things will be distributed, how much they will cost, and everything.
That's controlling everything.
Wow.
Jeez.
Unfair economic systems give rise to unfair ideas, including who to educate, how to educate, who deserves the best education, what your political system is. We can go on and on, but our focus is on education because those in the ruling class are going to push ideas to us that will ensure their survival. They're not going to push fair ideas to us so that we can say, we're just as equal as you. Come on. You get down from that pedestal and let's share. They're not going to push that idea. They're not going to push an idea that you're just as beautiful as they are and you looking like an African. You are an African. Number 6, today we live in a capitalist world. Capitalism in all of its manifestations. You can talk about early forms. Sometimes we don't associate them with capitalism, but we're talking about all forms of unfair economic systems when we lump it into capitalism and say in all of its manifestations. So we're talking about slavery, feudalism, colonialism, neocolonialism, and today's fascist capitalism. Capitalism in all of its manifestations is an unfair economic system. Those who own don't work. Those who work don't own. So it gives birth to unfair ideas such as racism, national oppression. The education system is going to be unfair, leaning toward those who look more like the ruling class than those who don't. So the education system in a capitalist society is unfair, reflecting the economic system that gave birth to it. Note that this historical materialist analysis does not state that fairness or unfairness in a society depends on a particular people or a particular, what some people say, race of people. It doesn't state that at all. We don't believe that. It states that it is the economic system that determines fairness or unfairness, justice or injustice in a society. Because we ending up now, number 7, because capitalism is an unfair economic system, the education system throughout the capitalist world ensnares our youth, trapping them in a vicious cycle of oppression. And so we say, as the Pan-African Revolutionary Socialist Party and any other Pan-African Revolutionary Socialist organization out there, this is what we say. Capitalism is our primary enemy. It's our primary enemy. Anything that looks like capitalism, some unfair economic system like that. Capitalism in all of its manifestations must be destroyed. That's how I think we can, hopefully that's helpful and just tying together what we're talking about throughout this year in our calendar. Whether you're talking about the injustice system that exists for our people or the education system that exists for our people, it's going to be unfair because this is a society you're living in. And capitalism just has to be destroyed.
And you know what, Mama D? Just thinking about some of the things you said about the unfair ideas give rise to unfair actions, which creates more negative experiences for our African youth. And I'm also thinking about how, like, it's justified through people being selfish, like the selfishness that's out here nowadays. And is justified, like, you know, I'm able to get my things. I'm able to make sure that I'm good. Me and my people and my family are good instead of thinking about everybody. And so that selfishness is part of like one of the reasons and one of the excuses that's out here
And
as part of people that look like us that support capitalism.
it's a direct birth child of capitalism. Because you up there, all you thinking about is making the money for yourself, power for yourself. Look at these politicians in the U.S. lying to the people left and right just so they can get elected. They don't care. Now it's open. This is when we call it fascist capitalism. You ain't caring about nothing. You can be unveiled and revealed and everything else. It doesn't matter to you. You are still going your selfish way, telling bold-faced lies, saying one thing one time, saying something the other. Our children, this is why we say we got to be a filter in between until we can destroy capitalism, in between capitalism and our youth. Something has to be placed there to protect them or give them something else. Because if there's a direct propaganda coming from capitalists through media and stuff like that to our youth, they're just growing up in their own way, just like selfish, uncaring. I don't even care about my grandmama. This is how they are living. And so it calls for what we're going to talk about, hopefully, in some short-term and media solutions. And what we do, Tasha, is these weekend schools for children. We got to give them something. We got to show them another way and teach them according to what we believe in: humanism, collectivism, egalitarianism. Otherwise, like you said in that calendar piece that you read, that education system of the capitalists are working really well. It's designed to go ahead and grow them up to be like you. And if they're not, you're going to kill them or send them right to jail. That's their destiny. It's very sad, but I know we said we were going to bring on our guests, Kim and Paju, and let's bring them on, Tasha.
All righty.
Well, Tasha, here we are with our wonderful brother and sister, Paju and Kim Juve, Pan-African Revolutionary Socialist Party from way back. And so, they're coming with important information for our listeners. What do you think, Tasha?
You're welcome, Sister Kim and Brother Pa. Welcome. Thank you guys for being guests.
Thank you. Good morning.
Good morning. All right, so we know that both you two have been in education for a pretty long time. And just earlier, we just read a calendar piece about youth and education, talking about how the capitalist system has a direct relationship with the youth struggling as far as education. So this question is for Pa. Can you talk about the educational system at home? Or Mama, can you talk about the educational system at home? Well, and just start off with like what role have you played in the setting and where?
Okay. Well, thank you for inviting us this time around, Africans. We admire the work that you are doing, and the struggle will continue with us participating on any time, anywhere that you all want us to do. Now, education at home, depending on which side you look at. Nkrumah taught us that there are three elements three elements. One is the basic, which is traditional African society, and then you have the Euro-Christian aspect of the African experience and the Islamic aspect of the African experience. Now, education at home follows those two tendencies that the African experience. There was, before the coming of the European in the 19th century, Arab Islamic education that was predominant, especially in places like Upper Nigeria, Kano area, and all that. and they were actually experiences of Islam on the continent of Africa before the coming of the Christianity. Now, the role education as a role, education plays a very critical role in transforming cultures and society. That's what, in general, genuine education in a genuine culture must do. But colonial powers, we initiated a colonial education, uh, came in and imposed their own education system and language on the local population. That's, that's how you define really what they wanted to do. And in that process, African children were educated to play a subordinate role, okay, in the development of what they have defined as a strategy based on their ideology for the exploitation of the people. Therefore, you have the role of the missionaries. You have, working side by side with the traders and merchants, coordinating the African society, the area that they were able to penetrate, and looking at children who are helpless, and trying to impose certain things on them. And we brought in alienation, a denial of language, okay? And not only that, but impose the Africans to despise even the language that they study, which imposes superiority and false intentionality to the European who come in to educate us. The missionary schools that they created were, in our experiences, were schools that were training Africans and subjected into labor, okay, that they did not want to do while they were colonizing us and exploiting the continent, the land, and so on and so forth. I am a typical classic experience of that. I went to, because from a Muslim background, I went to Islamic school at the age of 3, 4, at the age of 5. I also have an experience going into schools that were created by missionaries, working side by side with traders and with the merchants, determining what it is that we want Africans to learn, so that sooner or later they will represent us and do the work that they started doing on the continent of Africa. And it is very evident right now in the world of neocolonialism that they were very, very successful in the differentiation of classes, in the differentiations of society, who is what and for what role. Yeah, this is, we walk into Islamic thing, here is the Arab language. We walk into the missionary work, and you go into those classes, the first thing they say to you is A is for apple. And we ain't seen apple yet at that time at the age of 5. So we don't know what an apple is.
It's an A for apple. What's an apple?
Yeah. The people tasted it. And that picture, and that's the sign of the system of alienation, and the force of a language, that if you do not speak the language properly, you are ashamed inside the culture. That's what missionary education was. The justification of our exploitation through bringing the concept of God, to the young folks who are around, so that they can represent them and work for them. That is just the strategy, the ideological strategy that was being used systematically to eliminate the culture of the people, impose a superiority concept of language, which is the English language, the French language, the Portuguese language, and all of those other languages, as if they are superior to whatever we were doing. And we were a classic case of it. Now, in that process, you can look at how they were able to work with the merchants. Then they will start to bring in selectively sons of chiefs, to establish their inferiority over them. And that was the strategy, and the tactic that they will use to educate us. In that respect, they started to create a system that really differentiates people's ability in the modern day curriculum that imperialism created globally as to who is better than the other through numbers, which is first, second, third positions and what have you. And experience was a serious competition within the people, the young people, who is clever, who is not clever, and so on and so forth. This later on will manifest itself in a form of a class reality that we are still seeing, in Africa. Now, I should mention that the colonial education spearheaded by the British was not alone, because after the American independence in here, we realized that Plessy versus Ferguson, that was created in 1896, which was called Separate but Equal, became also a blueprint, for apartheid in South Africa.
I know that's right.
We created a colonial education that's still in existence, that the race is supposed to separate. This is the coming of racism within that educational system that were created by merchants, missionaries, and traders. Now, so you can see that the system of education is still not the same thing, because as we speak, for example, a fifth of all the 6th and 11th graders Africa south of the Sahara are out of school. Yeah, you can see that 60% of youth between the age of 15 and 17 are not enrolled. And 9 million of them are young girls between 6 and 11 years old. And they will never attend school. Now you can see that impact of neocolonialism. We can give you a list. For example, in Niger, little Niger, you have 1,647,000 young people who are no longer in school. Tanzania is 1,434,000 who are not in school. Mali, 1,343,000 youth between the ages of 11 and 17 who are not in school. South Africa, Burkina Faso, all of them about a million. Chad, Senegal, 681,296 between the ages of 11 who are not in school. This was the strategy, and you have in South Africa 40% dropouts before grade 12 in South Africa, as we speak.
Wow.
40%.
40%.
So you can see this. What we have transformed. It's always been very limited in the amount of people who are educated on the continent of Africa, and they utilize them for sole purposes.
And here too. I mean, you don't need everybody. You don't need all, and you understand why so many of them are drowning in the Mediterranean Sea. What is it there for them? Lack of education, like you said, Pies, is killing us.
And by the way, there are people going across the Mediterranean Sea who actually went to school in Africa. But
but
because
no
of the lack of
employment, right?
yes, no strategy for employing them and what have you, so they
Right, right.
decided it's the best thing to go. So
Mm-hmm.
this is the price of what we have suffered from colonialism.
Mm-hmm.
Like the culture, the inferiorization of us, having their culture superior, and what have you. And this is why, you know, there, and you have the searching in history where they will never tell you the history of your people. So
Getting
when you
worse
look at
all the time.
yeah, so when you look at the colonial system, they act as if African culture did not have an educational system that used to raise their children in a way appropriate to the culture.
Mm-hmm.
And they started to alienate that. They started to alienate the Africans out of their cultures and introduce a westernized culture. And when you are growing up in a society like that, you are going to Western schooling, you begin to realize that you can come back home every now and then and make a mistake and speak an English word to your grandma who doesn't speak a language. And you begin to see the systematic alienation and the separation, you know. So then they began to create the classes because once the colonial master created a cash economy during the time of colonialism, they alienated the majority, of Africans who are not connected with the caste system that they created to sustain the colonial exploitative system. So as we speak, even on the continent of Africa today, almost like 60% in different societies are not really necessarily connected with the caste economy because maybe lack of education or
Mm-hmm.
they were farmers and they exchange goods in terms of services and what have you. So this is what colonialism has created. That was our colonial education as a system.
And
And
oh, sorry.
yeah,
I
but
was
we say any oppressive condition, Secretary, you should tell us the dialectics of culture in order to use the instrument of oppression and to reverse it as an instrument for our liberation.
that's
And
what.
if you also look at it, there's only one thing that you can look at as far as education is concerned, that Africans were able to utilize whatever negative education they gave us to create people like the Senghors, the Kwame Nkrumahs, which originally they were educated to represent the European value system of exploitation.
And
But
of
they were
course,
able to. Mhm.
I'm sorry, Pi Juice. I was just going to add, and of course, it always means that somebody else dropped some political education on you. So I mean, you can trace the influences that shaped Osagifo. Dr.
Mhm.
Kwame Nkrumah has to be somebody that's going to be. Tasha and I were talking about that, a cushion or filter between the colonialist or neo-colonialist capitalist education that they trying to raise you to be like them or kill you and send you to jail. We have to take our stand and give our youth something at least so that they can counter some of the lies and deception and other things they are receiving from our enemy. And it's the same thing I know as Kim is getting ready to talk about. Very, very similar tactics in terms of the U.S. and its education system. Isn't that right, Kim?
Mhm.
Whoa, that was super enlightening, and the parallels are so interwoven.
Mm.
And you look at Haas talking about colonial times. You look at what has happened here and how we we keep saying education, but all of us know that education is something that is way more than what they've been doing to us. When we are truly educated, we're looking at us developing based on what it is that we're experiencing, allowing ourselves to be thinkers about it, practicing it, pushing it forward, coming together with others to do something with it, and creating greater and bigger things. That's education. And being given the opportunity to allow that to happen from younger children up to adulthood. What we've been doing is schooling. And it's a big difference. Schooling is about training. When you look at education here in the U.S. and listening to Pa, schooling under colonialism, it's the same that happened here. And the reasons for it are all interwoven into creating this economic system that is designed to exploit and oppress others for a few to become prosperous and lord over us. Historically, when Africans were kidnapped, trafficked, and enslaved to become the unpaid labor force for enslavers in Europe and the Americans, Africans experienced physical, psychological indoctrination and trauma. Laws were enacted that made it illegal to teach us to read, and harsh punishment was inflicted when we were caught doing it. Reading and writing was problematic because knowledge is power. Knowledge is power. And the money class wanted to make sure everyone else was powerless. And maintaining an uneducated labor force helped them to develop capitalism and create the class and racist structures that continue to exist today. From the Constitution in 1776 to the establishment of compulsory public education in the 1800s, to all media that we hear today, it is about propaganda. Propaganda that is used to instill obedience, reduce democracy and free thinking, and ensure that power remains with the moneyed class. Horace Mann was a European who went around, traveled all over, looking for a model that could be used for educating or schooling. And he went to Prussia, which is now Germany, and the philosophy that they had in Prussia was control a man's thinking and you won't have to control their actions. Wow. Control a man's thinking and you won't have to control their actions.
That's what's happening.
That's what's happening, and that has been the status quo for centuries now. After slavery, during the industrial era, people, well, not after slavery, really during slavery, people like the big businessmen who controlled everything, Rockefeller, Carnegie, all of those families that were established down the eastern coast, all of them who had money from exploiting and oppressing other people, was ready for industrialization. They needed factories going, they needed workers, and they needed a labor force that wasn't men of letters and that kind of thing, people who might provide some competition. They got together and said what we needed is a cheap, trained labor force that follows directions, that respects authority, that was really passive, adhered, that could adhere to a bell schedule, that went along with basic learning. Pa called it the shopkeepers and stuff like that. You know, you just needed some basic math. And people were totally compliant. So these business people got together and decided to pump billions of dollars into compulsory public education. And back then, they went into the process of developing over 900 high schools. When you look at high schools here in the U.S., all of the older models, they really look like factories. They look like factories, and that's what they were training people for. But the people, when they did it, were not us. Those were for whites. This is how they looked at themselves. This is what they wanted for themselves, to create a lower class of whites who would be their workers and be that particular way. They felt that they already had enough of men of letters. They had enough of them. Those were going to be the people who would do the research and work, come out of the Harvards, the Stanfords, the other Ivy League schools, the University of Chicago's, and create for the businessmen this paradigm, this mindset for schools.
Still today.
Still today. So it wasn't until the passage of the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments that granted African citizenship with rights and privileges that we finally got schooling. We didn't know what we were signing up for. We finally got some schooling. Every time that anything happened that might move Africans from chattel property to doing anything where we're looked upon as people here in the U.S., there was all kind of white pushback and backlash. So once Africans became citizens and got some schooling, white pushback led to Jim Crow segregation laws, Plessy versus Ferguson, where you have your separate but equal schooling. Well, white backlash said,
Still
they
today.
will not be, till today, they will not be on parity with us.
Woo.
And people in Congress said, okay, we're going to do it, but we're just not going to provide a whole lot of money for it. So that was the beginning, kind of sort of beginning, of our inadequate funding. Anybody who's been a leader in a school knows that we're always crying about inadequate funding. However, Africans are resilient. Just like Pa said with the Sekou Touré's quote and what Africans did, we make a way out of no way. After our kidnapping and everything, our kidnapping, our trafficking, we still rise. We make a way out of no way. Those of us who were able to read and write in this language taught others. Our schools, our institutions, our organizations and social clubs were established, and Black teachers instilled race pride. And in the small communities that we had, as far as education was concerned, we excelled. That carried through to Brown versus the Board of Education, where Brown said, putting into separate educational facilities. And that law was so hard to enforce, so hard to enforce. White backlash led to vigilantism, terrorism. There was a school district in Virginia that said, huh, you said no separate educational facilities? We're going to shut down the school system here in our district. And they did it for 5 years.
The whole school system.
The whole school system there. I don't know what they did with their kids. Maybe they taught them at home or did what maybe that was the beginning of the homeschooling movement, huh?
Yeah, the whole private reality began.
Yes. So that was then. We continued through to the civil rights movement. Laws got enacted in our favor. Voting rights, public housing, political accessibility. Hey, white backlash happened again. This led to underfunding for everything that we got at that time. It led to redlining, underemployment, crack being just dumped in our communities, and structural racism compounding more problems, leading to the deterioration of a lot of our communities. The quality of schools is by design.
Of course.
And it was all based on that historical era of designing propaganda and information to boost business and make business prosper and maintain class stratifications.
And it's so interesting, Kim. What a beautiful presentation you make, and a beautiful one that Pod Youth made. It is just information that has to be out there. And you know, you notice when you go back like you two did, and we neglected to say that you are educators from way back. That's what we wanted to say at the beginning. Introduce yourself, because you know we forgot to do that. You principals and vice principals, curriculum directors, and all of that educational experience you two have. You know, we couldn't have any better people to come on and talk to us about this whole history. And when you talk about it, you know, you notice that the tactics are the same, aren't they? You know, capitalism recycles its tactics. You know, that's all it is. And that's why we say we got to destroy capitalism in all of its manifestations. But you see this whole backlash coming again. And recently in Florida, you hear about that mess? And yeah. We're going to teach slavery, but we're going to teach how black people benefited from it. You know.
well, you know, we have to make the whites feel good. You know, their precious demeanors cannot be imposed upon by the truth.
And Kim, you know the other thing, and I know Pa used to say this all the time. You don't want any positive relationship between a working class European and a working class African, because then what you're going to do is look at who your true enemy is, who your principal enemy is. You're going to start looking at capitalism, you know. But if you can divide and conquer and have us fight each other, you can survive, right?
We looked at divide and conquer amongst ourselves.
Yes.
We didn't really look at divide and conquer with poor whites. You know, it wasn't something we thought about, but that's the nature of classism here under capitalism.
Yeah, Tasha was just talking about that and how, if we don't have that filter between the capitalist propaganda and our socialist propaganda and politically educate our own youth, that's the only option we have today, really.
Yeah.
To take our youth back under our wings. And Kim, you did such a great job. People talk about John Hope Franklin in the past, who's a teacher, and in all of these schools, you have these people teaching them, about their African history. But we can't not teach it just because we're not in the school system. We have to create these alternative ways of teaching our youth, don't we?
Absolutely.
And from my long history of experience in colonial education, uh, became a teacher. All my life, I've been a teacher in the party, outside of the party. But the most impressive aspect of our experience was when I encounter alternative education, in North America, teaching a different kind of a curriculum, pedagogy, and what have you. And it was an amazing experience to have simply, deliberately, 100% of youth from the street that would attend our school. And we were able to eliminate the concept of letter grades, which is an initial stage of class differentiation. We had a comprehensive kind of a schedule where kids are going to educate themselves based on a schedule of their own and their ability. Because
so important.
that was an instrument to fight against the special ed concept that they created once Plessy versus Ferguson was established. Then you have the concept of special ed gradually being introduced to eliminate children of color.
Wow.
From here, and that's why Brother Jones Conjufu once wrote, from special ed to prison system.
Yes, indeed.
Yes, and that is still happening. Where the level of education, in terms of our people here who are in jail, sometimes stop to the fourth grade when they identify them as special ed.
Oh, when you talk about special education, I want us to really think about how we're looking at special education. When we get those narratives in those meetings where our children are labeled emotionally disturbed, learning disabled, cognitively delayed, confrontational, oppositional disorder. These are all environmental characteristics. Environmental characteristics connected to a perception of keeping children obedient, keeping them placid, keeping them still. And children shouldn't be still because their minds are constantly active. Those are all environmental labels connected to structural racist policies.
Emanating from the capitalist system. Isn't that right?
Yes.
They even have the parents bought in. They even have the parents bought in with it because they always talk about something is a manifestation of their disability. And it's not that. It's really the environment, like you said, Sister Kim. It's really these environmental factors that were already put here.
That's right. That's right.
And
that doesn't mean we don't need special ed. But the special ed that's needed is for children who were born with limitations. Speech and language difficulties, hearing, vision impairments, fine gross motor limitations. You got a limb missing or something like that. You got a degenerative heart disease from birth and those kind of things. That's what it's for. And when parents were out there trying to get the money to have your kid in special ed, when you have those kinds of real special education problems connected to a child's limitations. Oh, as a parent, you come into a school, you can get whatever it is that your child needs to succeed. I had a parent whose daughter was quadriplegic, something like that. Maybe both legs. She had to walk with the uh, canes and everything. That mom made them put an elevator in the school for her to access the upper floors and an area in the back. That is what real special education is about. That's what that law, IDEA, Individuals with Developmental Education Act, is really about. These things that our children get labeled with, no. It's to keep us indoctrinated.
There's something emerging that we are really taking it, and I don't know how well we are examining. IDEA law, the REA, the LRE, the least restricted environment, and all that. They have enlarged that into what you now call charter schools. And these charter schools are strictly for privatization. I have experience building with my colleagues 2 or 3 charter schools in the city of Chicago, all with a program for 4 or 5 years. When we created the W.E.B. Du Bois Early College High School, it scared the hell out of a whole bunch of people in Chicago. That's what we were going to do. And charter schools are different form of privatization.
And so many of them don't have the oversight that they need, so, and you got so many we have one right down the street, and it's all of our youth going in there, but all the teachers look differently, don't look like us, and the oversight is so poor. But we just have to have your back. That's all, because our time. Look at all this information. We just want to end with saying, some of the things we can do immediately to help our youth, and short term. And one thing we always talk about is showing our youth by our daily practice, the African world, or the world we're struggling to bring into existence. We know our youth hear what we say, but they see what we do. They hear what the capitalists say, but they see what they do. So we have to be a living example, for them, that they can see and witness. And that's how we remember some of our teachers that made the most impression on us. We just loved them because of their, not just what they said, but how they conducted themselves, the way they moved and stuff. And we also say we got to start an after school or weekend school for our youth. We got to do something, whether it's in our houses, whatever, or in whatever way we can politically educate them about, our enemy and our permanent solution and all of that, which we know is Pan-Africanism. But we just have to step in there. I'm sorry, Pa, you were saying.
On the Pan-Africanism, and like we went back to Nkrumah, where we looked at the 3 elements in traditional Africa, the 3 elements he's emphasized as a framework, as a strategy, especially when it comes to we just call it the decolonization of colonial education.
Oh, right.
Okay.
That's what it is.
All the way down to the decolonization of African universities.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. African universities exist in such a way that the criteria of excellence and what have you is based on Western educational structures.
Oh, yeah.
And, all the universities are attached to Western universities. That's part of the imperialist decolonization and attached to globalism, or a new form of globalism that is in existence, still creating some serious stuff where 1% of the world richest folks are in control of 80% of the world in designing the future of Africa and the whole world.
Mm. No, that's true. That is so true. And
so
we
that is why from my personal experience creating alternative schools that were radical. My God, I saw so many potentials. I saw so many possibilities, running those schools.
Yes.
That we have to create, like Malcolm X used to tell us. If you let somebody else educate your child, you will lose your child.
That's that quote Tasha started off with. It's a beautiful quotation. Tasha, don't you have it in front of you?
No, yeah. Only a fool will let an enemy teach his children.
I know that's right. Well, Africans, thank you so very much. I'm telling you, I don't know when we had, this has been, what do you think, Tasha? I can't even think of the right word, inspiring? What are you going to say?
Yeah, I know that. I have 2 pages of notes over here because I need to look at it. We talk, and I really love the way Sister Kim and Brother Pi have made it kind of like a timeline, like a visual learner.
Oh, yeah.
And so they said this happened because of this, and this happened because of this. Like the way it all tied into each other.
Isn't that something?
Was amazing.
Amazing. That's the word I was looking for, Tasha. You said, look, amazing.
Keep on the great work.
Yep.
Thank you.
Keep up the great work, yeah.
Oh, we have y'all on board too little. We got to bring you more and more and more, and we're gonna do it too if you two are willing, because this is beautiful.
Yeah, wonderful. Thank you.
Okay, forward ever.
Backward never. All right, forward.
Yeah, ready for the revolution.
I know that's right. On.
Throughout 2023, at times with the help of invited guests, our focus will be the theme of our 2023 calendar, Global African Youth Caught in a Snare of Capitalism. So join us this month when we will continue our discussion with the focus on youth and culture.
Wow. And we had some powerful guests this time, didn't we, Tasha?
Yeah, Sister Kim and Brother Pa.
Wow.
They really did a good job of really those connections and showing us.
Yes, indeed.
How the condition our youth are in, facing what they're facing right now.
Meanwhile, visit our website, PanAfricanRevolutionarySocialistParty.org. Email us at panafricanrsp@gmail.com. Like us on SoundCloud.com. Visit us on YouTube. And leave comments on our Facebook page, www.facebook.com/PanAfricanSocialist/.
And remember, organization is the key. I was going to say education is the key, which is true.
It is true too, isn't it?
But remember, organization is the key. So join us, the Pan-African Revolutionary Socialist Party, or some other revolutionary Pan-African Socialist organization. A union of African Socialist states is on the horizon.
A union of African Socialist states is on the horizon. Forward ever.
Backwards never.
His story. All history is a pyramid. First they told the world black boys and girls were cursed and they turned black so they can build the West off black folk back, and this would justify that. Then they moved Egypt to the Middle East just to separate it from the continent, to erase Africa's accomplishments with the sciences and the knowledges. Universities and the colleges, architects and astrologists taught and documented all of this while y'all was ill in the Caucasus. Debate me with your argument. You hate me, so you augment truth, evidence, proof, relevant, factual, evident, contradict the line, law as narrative. The Africans were savages, Hippocrates or a hypocrite, a European or Imhotep. Pyramids, Masaba steps, Nubia where it started at. 50 queens at the heart of that. Mitochondrial mother mass. Let's keep it real, what we reveal, although it's ill, motherfucker rap. Stolen legacy, give it back. White supremacy, psychopaths. I know math, know my past. The last for first, the first for last. Get your pass, late for class. Bitches pastor told me I'm a curse. Teacher told me I'm inferior. Judges tell me I'm the worst. Hey, who I'm seeing in the mirror now? They said I'm nothing but a slave. Nigga better get to work. They told me that they were superior. I got a lot to unlearn. Sip what I'm saying now. They said I'm a feeble mind, an infantile, little child. I believe that shit for a little while. His story, fake news and owl. Set them straight, shut them down. Turns out they're all pedophiles, billionaires, politicians, priests, police, even women. Just saying, listen, pay attention, it's prophecy. They say it's written, depends who wrote it. If I quote it, Dr. Ben, Ivan Venn, Sertima, some heard of them. Analyze these murderers, so sanitized, they murder us. They fuck your mind, first because slaver's mind is fast to follow. Nigga, you Zeus and Apollo, Ogun, Shango, a djembe drum, a bongo, the Dagon, Orion, some Olmecs from Congo. Map the stars, map the spirit. They don't wanna let me map the lyrics. That's why they don't back the truth. That's why they manufacture roots. Dumb them down, distract the group, so you won't get back to your roots. Actual, factual, stupidity, tactical, a torch, a radical. It's just pastor told me I'm a curse. Teacher told me I'm inferior. Judges tell me I'm the worst. Hey, who I'm seeing in the mirror now? They said I'm nothing but a slave. Nigga better get to work. They told me that they were superior. I got a lot to unlearn. See what I'm saying now?